Welcome to our video lesson on fractions and decimals. We're going to talk about converting between fractions and decimals to fractions, and about how to order fractions. Before we start, we have to talk about some key terms that you're going to need to know. The first one is a terminating decimal. It is a decimal that stops or terminates. It reminds me of the Terminator, a decimal that would stop or terminate. Some examples of terminating decimals are down here. 1 25 hundredths is an example of a terminating decimal because it doesn't repeat or continue. Another example, 8 hundredths is a great example of a terminating decimal because, again, it stops. Whereas repeating decimals are decimals that repeat the same digits or group of digits again and again. Examples of repeating decimals are 4 and 33 hundredths. This little line, the symbol up here, means that it repeats. So that means that this decimal is actually 4.33333, and the 3 keeps going forever. That sign means the numbers that are underneath it repeat to eternity or forever. Another example is 9 and 24 hundredths. It repeats forever too, and 8 and 1,675 ten-thousandths is also an example of a repeating decimal. Okay, for converting from a decimal to a fraction, it's my favorite way to do it. It's my favorite one to convert because all you do is you just say it. So you need to write the fraction as you would say the decimal and then simplify it. So let's start with the first example here. Write 28 thousandths as a fraction in simplest form. So when I say this number, remember the first place here is the tenths place, then we have hundredths, and then we have thousandths. So this is 28 thousandths. And if you didn't look at the decimal, but you just thought about that as a fraction, 28 thousandths. Think about how you would write that. Hopefully you're thinking, oh, I'd write it like this. 28 over 1,000 because it's 28 thousandths. You're absolutely correct. Now we have this number written as a fraction. Now we just need to simplify it. A lot of us like to think about, okay, find the greatest common factor. But what I've noticed a lot of you doing, which is a great strategy, is if you notice that they're both divisible by 2 or a different number right away, just divide them both by 2 to make it a little easier for yourself. So hopefully you can see that 28 and 1,000 are both divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide 28 by 2 and I get 14. And then 1,000 by 2 and I will get 500. So I have 14 500ths. Now hopefully you can see that we can keep going. 14 can be divided by 2 and that gives me 7. And then 500 can be divided by 2 and that gives me 250. And we know 7 is a prime number, which means its only factors are 1 and 7. And since 250 isn't divisible by 7, this would be my fraction in simplest form. Okay, what if it was a mixed number like this, where we have 5 and 8 hundredths? Well, again, say it the way you would say the number out loud, and then write it that way as a fraction. So think about it, 5 and 8 hundredths. I would write that as 5 wholes, and 8 hundredths. Then we need to simplify it. You can find the GCF of 8 and 100, or you can use the same technique from above. I know that both 8 and 100 are divisible by 4, so I would write that this is equal to 5, and then I divide my 8 by 4. 8 divided by 4 will give me 2, and 100 divided by 4 will give me 25. So this written in simplest form would be 5 and 2 25ths. Okay, now that we know how to convert from a decimal to a fraction, let's talk about converting from a fraction to a decimal. Now, when we're looking at fractions, the sign in the middle, so here we have 7/8. 7/8, this symbol right here, really just means 7 divided into 8 parts, or 8 equal groups. So the symbol in the middle actually kind of stands for division. It really does mean division. So a fraction means division. So if we want to convert from a fraction into a decimal, we divide the numerator by the denominator. So here we have 7/8, and we need to write it as a decimal. So I'm going to take my numerator of 7 and divide it by my denominator of 8. Now you're going to have to remember back to when we did division with decimals. 8 can't go into 7. So I put a 0 up top here and I add a decimal. Then I can add a 0 when I add a decimal. Make sure you bring it up right away so you don't forget to do that later. Then I'm going to add a 0 here. How many times can 8 go into 70? Hopefully you think 8 times, and 8 times 8 is 64. Now I need to do 70 minus 64, so I borrow from the 7, and I have 10 minus 4, which gives me 6. I'm going to add another 0 and bring it down. How many times can 8 go into 60? 8 goes into 60 7 times, and 7 times 8 is 56. So again, I can't do 0 minus 6, so I'll borrow from my 6, becomes a 5, and that becomes a 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. I'm not at 0 down here yet, so I'm going to add another 0 up top and bring that down. How many times can 8 go into 40? 8 can go into 40 5 times, and 5 times 8 is 40. 40 minus 40 gives me 0. Now I am done. This is a terminating decimal because it comes to an end. So now I know 7/8 written as a decimal is 875 thousandths. Make sure my decimal point's really clear there. Okay, let's look at this situation here. You need at least 3/4 of a pound of dried apricots for a recipe. You find a bag that contains 8/10 of a pound. Is this enough? I'm cubing it as I go. Okay, so what we need to do is figure out if 3/4 is greater than or less than 8/10. So what I need to do is divide 3 by 4 to convert it to a decimal so that I can compare them. 3 divided by 4. Again, I'm going to have the same situation I did above. 4 can't go into 3. So I'm going to add my decimal here, bring it up right away, and write that 4 goes into 3 0 times. Then I can add a 0 over here and it will be the same number. Then I think, how many times does 4 go into 30? 4 goes into 30 7 times, and 7 times 4 is 28. 30, I can't do 0 minus 8, so I borrow from my 3 and it becomes a 2. This becomes 10. 10 minus 8 gives me a 2. I add a 0 over here and bring it on down. How many times does 4 go into 20? 4 goes into 25 times, and 5 times 4 is 20. Then I do 20 minus 20, and that gives me 0. So that means that this bag that has 3/4 of a pound actually has 0 and 75 hundredths of a pound of apricots. And so yes, the bag has enough. We're going to do 2 more examples. Both of our examples back here were terminating decimals, which means they ended. Let's see if we can find a different situation. So here we have 7/11. So I'm going to divide my 7 by 11. How many times can 11 go into 7? 11 can't go into 7, it's 0 times. So I add a decimal here, right here, and then I bring it up right away and put my decimal right there so I can forget about it. Now I add another 0 here. How many times can 11 go into 70? 11 can go into 7, well, I think 11 times 7 is 77, and 1 less than 7 is 6. So 11 probably goes into 76 times. 6 times 11 is 66. Then I'm going to subtract them. 0 minus 6 I can't do, so I need to borrow from the 7. It becomes a 6, and this becomes a 10. 10 minus 6 gives me 4. I'm going to add another 0. Bring it down. How many times can 11 go into 40? Okay, I know 11 times 4 would be 44, so I think how many times what's 1 less than 4 would be 3, and 3 times 11 is 33. 40 minus 33 is 7. Okay, now we're going to add another 0. Bring down that 0. How many times does 11 go into 70? 6 times. We've already done this. It's looking familiar. 6 times 11 is 66. I've done the subtraction before. I remember that it's 4. I add the 0. I bring it down. I've done this part right here already. So I know that 11 goes into 40 3 times, and 3 times 11 will give me 33. And I'm getting the same answers here again and again. So that means it's a repeating decimal. So I can write this as 0 and 63, make sure my decimal's clear, 63 hundredths repeated. That line across the top tells me it goes on again and again and again. Let's do one last example. I'm going to clear some space here so that you can see what I'm doing. Here I have 1/3. So again, I'm going to divide my 1 into 3 equal parts. 3 can't go into 1, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Bring up that decimal right away so you don't forget to later. 3 can go into 1 0 times. How many times can 3 go into 10 though? It goes in 3 times. And 3 times 3 gives me 9. 10 minus 9 gives me 1. I add a 0, I bring it down. How many times can 3 go into 10? 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. This looks like I'm doing the same thing again and again and again. Well, I am, and I would do this forever. So that means that this is a repeating decimal as well, and that 1/3 can actually be written as 0 and 3/10 repeated. I hope this helps you to understand how to convert between decimals and fractions and decimals and how they're all related to each other. Now it's time for you to do some practice. That's all for now. I'll talk to you later.